everyone. A very good evening. You're watching this special edition of The Money Show, which is dedicated to help you prepare your finances this time around to stand against one of India's most deadly diseases, cancer. Did you know India's cancer burden has more than doubled over the last 26 years, with the highest increase reported in breast cancer? Every year, India reports more than 1 million new cases, and research states that 500,000 deaths in the country happen either due to ignorance or detection of the disease at a later stage. Not to mention, of course, the sort of trauma you go through emotionally, physically, and also the way it hits your pocket. So now, what we would like to talk about is, can you insure yourself against such a deadly disease? And if you already have a regular insurance plan, should you opt for a cancer special plan? And also, how to ensure that your family financially does not suffer due to this disease. I have with me, on the occasion of World Cancer Day, Vikas Mathur, the head of health marketing with Universal Sompo General Insurance, as well as personal finance expert Roongta. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining in. And Mr. Roongta, I'll start off with you first, just to set the context. It's very unfortunate. It's very disheartening to note that the number of cancer cases in India, across the world for that matter, are only on the rise, and survival rates as well at this point of time, unfortunately, since there's no cure for, especially if you broke into the higher stages, is extremely bleak. Let's get in your thoughts first on why everyone should have a financial backup plan for this deadly disease, since it seems to be only increasing in number by the years and by the decades to come.
I think you should have a financial plan for exactly the reverse reason of what you stated. I think, sure, the spread of cancer is increasing, but so is the medical treatment. And because of that, the number of people who survive and lead lives and continue to lead useful lives far exceeds the number of people who succumb to cancer, and that gives rise to certain costs. So I think having a financial plan for the three type of costs that occur, first of course is the medical treatment costs, and that would include things like daycare costs like chemotherapy, etc. The second cost are basically the during the time of treatment and the immediate period after that are the associated costs, such as an attendance cost, travel and stay costs if treatment is not available in your city, and things like that, and maybe loss of pay for either the attendant or for the person suffering from the disease during the treatment, non-reimbursable costs. And third, of course, is the loss of source of income itself. I mean, if you're in a job, you might lose your job itself, or if you're in a business, then maybe your business will go down, or you might have to close it down. And I think the first part, treatment of medical expenses in an hospital, I think that is now reasonably well covered. Of course, it's typically never a pure cancer cover, but the what is popularly called Mediclaim cover, now that is done, and I think a lot more people are reasonably adequately covered for that. And if they are not, they should cover it. I think the second part is not covered in terms of the associated non-reimbursable costs. And the third part, I don't even think people think about it. The loss of income, the loss of source of income itself. And that is, I think, number 2 and number 3 are both covered by critical illnesses plans. The second one, now a lot of people are covering through a 3 lakh, 4 lakh, 5 lakh kind of a top up on the Mediclaim plan or in their life insurance plans, etc. I think the third part, which is the replacing income, whilst when you lose your life, replacing income is covered by term plans. the more likelihood that you will have cancer and will survive, which is a much bigger likelihood today. Thank God for medical advancement. I think that part is still not covered properly or completely undercovered. One, I think critical illness in excess of 1 crore is very difficult to get in India, even where it is available, and even up to that 1 crore is pretty expensive as compared to what is available in the world. So I think these last two areas are the areas that need a lot more attention from both the general population as well as insurance companies.
Okay, so yes, in fact, to talk about that, we have with us then Vikas from the insurance industry. And Vikas, unfortunately, you as well may be having a lot of customers, a lot of, consumers who have had to, battle this deadly disease. And I suppose while Mr. Roongta raised a very, very crucial point, and that is the loss of income, which many a times individuals don't sit to calculate. I think first and foremost, you have to get to the treatment bit. On an average, and like you mentioned, thankfully due to medical breakthrough, treatment is possible, but it also gets expensive. So on an average, what sort of treatment cost is an individual staring at?
So thank you so much, Ravina, for inviting us on this special. Basically, today is the World Cancer Day, and this is the right occasion to discuss more detailed things about the cancer. So before I go into the second point which you raised, like what is the tentative cost which could be there. Prior to that, there are certain things which we all have to keep in mind. So one thing is, of course, financial the support to the thing is always there through the insurance, and for, as Mr. Roongta has also mentioned correctly, whether it's a base policy or a top-up policy or super top-up policy, if the lifestyle habits have to be kept in mind. Nowadays, if you see, the cancer is what? Cancer is basically a abnormal or uncontrolled growth of body cells, and if it is not detected at an early stage, it can spread to the other body organs, which can lead to a fatal scenario. So that's very correct that nowadays, and in fact, 1/3 of the cancers are preventable by adopting the proper healthy lifestyle, getting the screening done, quitting tobacco and alcohol, avoiding the ultraviolet radiation things. So like people are nowadays are also opting for tanning thing and all. So that is very dangerous at times for the skin as well. So when it comes to the costing part, if you detect this deadly disease at the early stage, it is always good because it is going to give you a better, cost-effective treatment, as well as it will have a higher survival rate. So both things put together, you have to make sure that the regular screenings are must. So nowadays, most of these wellness centers and the diagnostic chains, they are offering the very reasonable prices on the screening side. So once in a year, I think beyond the age of 35, 36, one should always regularly go for this health screening to ensure that everything is going good in the body. Coming to the second point, when it is detected at the early stage, the cost may vary from 7.5 lakhs or 7 lakhs to 10 lakhs based on the situation of the tumor or the size of the tumor.
Okay, yeah. Okay, we'll just get to those stages one by one. Let's talk about, of course, the stage where at this point of time, Mr. Roongta, you as well as a personal finance expert always recommend that every individual should set aside some money for a rainy day.
Right.
You have a certain income, a certain amount goes away into expenses, and then you have savings of which maybe you put a little bit in investments, but then you set aside emergency funds, rainy day funds, etc. I suppose a deadly disease like this would count as one. So if I have to save up for such for the unforeseeable circumstance, should, God forbid, such a disease hit me, what should I, insure? I mean, how should I prep myself? We spoke about the statistics, right, about how there are millions of cases, new cases being reported in cancer. So how could I financially prep myself so that I do not have to see a day where while I'm suffering, I have finances as well to worry about?
Excellent question. And I think you are worried enough when a disease like cancer, or cancer, when a disease like cancer hits you. Clearly, the disease itself has caused a lot of stress. Fortunately, today, I think the chances of a cure, especially if it is detected reasonably early, the chances of a cure have increased exponentially. It's the cost that you need to worry about. And I think since this is reasonably covered, it is coverable through insurance rather than save up for a contingency which has large costs. Please remember, when you save up for a contingency, you will put that away in a low yielding kind of a fund. Otherwise, it's not really a contingency fund. You will have high liquidity on a fund like that, and you will put it away in a place where it does not, volatile. You cannot put it away in an equity fund as a contingency fund. And this risk is very easily coverable by insurance. And I think it should be covered by insurance rather than through a contingency fund. Of course, if you are extremely well heeled and you have plenty of money, then you can probably think of a contingency fund, but that is primarily to incur costs of going overseas. Because for cancer, there could be treatment, experimental treatment that might be available overseas, which may not be available in India, and getting insurance for that is difficult. So for that, you might want to cover, but that would be a very large amount. And I think that really is material to people who have otherwise got all their goals cleared. Otherwise, it's my view that you should cover it through insurance rather than try and create a contingency fund for treatment of this matter.
Well, Vikas, that's where you come into this conversation, right? A contingency fund means that you have to set aside a lot of money because cancer, unfortunately, is not something that you can treat very cheaply, at least not yet. We're all hoping that science comes out with an affordable medical breakthrough as well. But until then, we're hoping insurance at least would do the trick. So let's say if I do not have the dreaded disease yet, however, again, thanks to gene testing, etc., we do know the famous case of Angelina Jolie, right, getting her genes tested, and she realized that she does have that faulty gene which could cause her as well to get breast cancer. So anyway, to understand essentially, if I believe that I may be at risk of getting this deadly disease, what sort of insurance policies are available out there?
Very correctly mentioned that even the Angelina Jolie, or in Indian context, if you talk about even Sonali Bendre or Yuvraj Singh, they have also gone through that trauma, and they have come out as winners because they could financially, basically afford the treatment cost, as well as they had the willpower to come out of this as a winner. So I would say that I agree with Mr. Roongta that it's not only about the keeping a contingency fund. Insurance is the basic parameter to take care of all your expenses that way. So I would suggest for a normal person to go for a multi-layered approach. So by multi-layered approach, I would mean that the first layer can be taken as a basic medical claim policy that can take care of not only the cancer treatment, it can be of any other thing. So nowadays we have got this coronavirus threat, which is spreading out of China, which can maybe later on spread to the other part of the world. The government are taking their due care in that. But in case of any other disease also, if there is a first layer of insurance can be taken care. Let's say for a metro city, 10 lakh cover is, I think, sufficient to take care of the normal hospitalization of 4 to 5, 6 days time. And on top of this, as a second layer, you should have a top-up or super top-up policy, which will actually, in comparison to a basic medical claim, will be cheaper for the, to the pocket of the policy holder, and it can give you a coverage of even 1 CR. So the second layer can take care of the additional expenses in case of any, deadly disease like cancer or a bigger treatment cost which is required for the patient. Third layer would be, as Mr. Roongta has also mentioned, in case of somebody is losing out the job, or there are other out-of-pocket expenses. So one should also opt for a critical illness policy, basically, which works on a benefit basis. When the policyholder is diagnosed with any of the deadly disease or the diseases which are covered, he can be paid the lump sum amount in one go, and at least the out-of-pocket expenses or the expenses which are required or not covered in the basic policy. So that can be taken care by that third layer. So these are the things with me.
Okay. Okay, all right. We will be exploring all of those individual layers as well. But Mr. Roongta, now, coming to the next stage, unfortunately, an individual has been detected with the deadly disease. And because of that, like you mentioned, loss of pay, loss of business income, etc. How can an individual tackle that? I mean, obviously, there are going to have to be drastic changes in your lifestyle, unfortunately, in your family's lifestyle as well, because whatever money is earned as well, maybe by that individual or by the other members of the family, will have to go into the expenses. So how would you recommend families tackle that?
So I think there are two
Follow-up
elements to
question,
this.
actually. You spoke about how it's not a good idea to invest your contingency plans in an equity mutual fund. You have to put it in something liquid, etc., etc. I've heard even of these cancer-specific funds, cancer-specific mutual funds. I think HDFC has one, and there are other AMCs as well do have that have one. Would those be a good idea? I mean, do they really serve the purpose of, okay, you know what, you put money in this fund and I'll give it to you when you need it at a higher rate? Does it actually do that work?
So first, let me answer your first question.
Sure.
I think, see, the critical illness policy can serve both purposes. A smaller policy, maybe 5 lakh, 10 lakh critical illness policy, can help pay for associated expenses, as I said, around the disease treatment during the time when the treatment is happening or convalescence is happening. I think during that time, that policy can help. Because please remember, all that we are talking about is how to fight the disease financially. There is this whole element about fighting it along with your family, that is physical, emotional. The role of the financial comfort is only to make sure that it does not impede your physical fight, your emotional fight, your social fight. It is a fight. And I think the key thing to remember in cancer is very clearly that your chances of survival in most cases are extremely high. I think that is a key thing to remember. I think films have done a great disservice to this whole thing by painting it as a dread disease which leads to fatality. I think very clearly more and more medical science has ensured that you can survive this. Coming back to the loss of income, again, that's a large critical illness policy. So a 5-10 lakh can help you meet associated costs, etc., because it is paid in a lump sum once you are diagnosed with the disease. A larger policy, a 1 crore policy, a 2 crore, 3 crore policy, something akin to what you would have for a term insurance. Because when you get a disease like cancer, it effectively means financial death. Fortunately, it no longer means physical death, but it means financial death, because you may lose your job, you may have to close down your business. And I think a large policy gives you a lump sum that helps you replace the income that you lose. So I think doing that is extremely important. Uh, it is availability of these large policies that is a problem, and I think uh, my fellow panelist could probably answer on what and is happening on that end. Let me answer the second question you raised. I'm only aware of one cancer cure fund of HDFC AMC, which was basically a close-ended debt fund, which was actually meant for people who wanted to do philanthropy. So that what they did was it would go into a debt fund, which was a sort of an FMP. The dividend would be declared on that, which is unusual for a close-ended fund. And of that dividend, 50 or 100% would be donated to meet the costs of unfortunate people who are not able to meet the costs of treatment. So that was more of a philanthropic kind of a fund that helped other unfortunate people meet costs of fighting cancer. That was not really meant as a bulwark against your own fight, although you could use whatever is there in that debt fund as your contingency fund for cancer. And whatever earning is there, you could sort of contribute it to people. So I think it was an excellent idea, but primarily aimed at philanthropy rather than meeting your own costs. So I think that is what I'm aware about. I'm not really aware about any other specific kind of a cancer cure.
Now, Vikas, apart from the actual treatment, let's say the medicines or the chemotherapy or the hospitalization, there are various other smaller costs as well involved. Like, for example, if you have a helper who's going to join you, if you have to travel to another city, so maybe the salary cost. If you're traveling to another city, there may be rental costs as well that you may have to incur. Just in this manner, there are several small ancillary and associated costs, which sometimes can really blow up, and without one anticipating it. So, in insurance, would a general Mediclaim cover, or like you mentioned, you need that top up of critical insurance? Will critical insurance then do the trick?
So generally, what happens that many of the basic, Mediclaim covers policy, policy covers the OPD expenses as well. But there are multiple, additions which you have very rightly mentioned. That's all, not only the maybe the which we can put across on the table, but there are other loss of incomes that you have to maybe change your lifestyle because of the deadly disease, or because of the proximity to the hospital or the service provider. You have to change your location to the residence. So there are multiple factors which one has to keep in mind. So based on that, I think critical illness policy, or maybe the standard standalone cancer health policy, is a good option to take, because the benefit will be given to the patient or the policyholder at the time of diagnosis itself. In many of the policies, the condition of the survival period is there, that the person has to survive for 30 days from the date of diagnosis. Once that is be over, the entire amount can be passed on to the policyholder, and the policyholder can keep that amount in the his bank account, and at least take care of these expenses which were not covered in the main basic Mediclaim policy, as well as the top up or super top up policy. So that way, that is why I have suggested that this structured layered approach has to be adopted to make sure that it is cost effective to your pocket as well, and it also serves the actual purpose, which is the treatment as well as the benefit towards the other expenses.
Okay, Harsh, we were just talking about how the most important element that many a times people, it slips out of their mind because of obviously other pressing issues is, if by the grace of God you're able to battle the disease and you come out of it, you're still sort of on tender hooks, because essentially there may be certain kinds of jobs that you cannot do. It may become difficult to assimilate back into regular society, and that in turn would lead to decreased income, if not a loss of income completely. So Mr. Roongta, you mentioned it several times throughout the course of the interview, but just if we have to specifically talk about this issue, how would you recommend individuals, victims, go about managing this, even their families, in fact, for that matter?
So, two things. First is actually a request. I think we should stop referring to cancer as a deadly disease. It's a very serious disease, yes, but by referring to it as a deadly disease, we sort of increase the dread. I just want to re-emphasize that most victims of this disease are able to fight it and survive. And I think we just should be careful about the adjective that we use when we describe cancer. The second, and I think rightly, is the issue of assimilation back into society after having successfully fought, which a majority, in fact, a much larger than majority, a very high percentage of the people are going to be able to do. They are going to survive. They will go on to lead better lives, but they have to pick up the threads again. And that is where I think there is very little awareness of taking a critical illness policy. So there is so much awareness that if you die, your family's living standards should not drop. So take a term life policy, so that the term life policy will pay a lump sum, which will allow the income to be replaced. That, fortunately, thanks to great media coverage, thanks to a lot of people talking about it, I think that has really taken off. I think the same level of awareness on the impact is same. Remember, in fact, it is worse. because when you survive, not only do your costs remain the same, they actually go up and your income would have dropped. So I think taking a critical illness policy, at least equivalent to what you would have taken as a term life policy, is very important. And this is one place where I think even among advisors themselves, this as a reason for not taking this as a reason for taking the policy itself is rather restricted. And the second, even availability, as I have mentioned earlier, the availability of this policy and the cost at which this policy, large policies are available, I think they are quite prohibitive and difficult to obtain. I think this is something that the insurance industry needs to work to create awareness and to create availability at an affordable cost.
Well, we have Mr. Mathur right here then listening in to your request. And yes, Mr. Mathur, I suppose affordability is key. And like Mr. Roongta as well flagged off earlier, policies that will actually cover everything are sometimes too unaffordable for the middle class. Okay, let's talk about then the same topic. What about covering a potential income loss that could result due to an individual not being able to full-fledgedly assimilate back into society, get back to his or her old job? Would a critical illness policy cover that? Also, what should be the amount you recommend an individual take, to cover each and every angle when it comes to, tackling cancer financially?
Also, I think first I would like to compliment the point which Mr. Roongta has mentioned, that actually 1/3 of kind of variety of cancers are very much curable if you detect them at an early stage. That is why at the beginning of the discussion I mentioned the importance of the health screening and the healthy lifestyle which we all have to adopt to make sure that we all remain healthy throughout the life. Coming to the second point, that when we talk about the policies, critical illness policies, which basically works on a benefit basis. So the critical illness policy typically covers from 10 to 15 different variety of diseases. It could range from any cancer is of course one of them. So that basically is a policy which gives you a lump sum amount which can take care of your expenses, out of pocket expenses, whereas your Mediclaim or the top-up policy can take care of your basic expenses toward the treatment. So the critical illness policy will not ask you whether you are actually undergoing a treatment or not. It will basically give you a lump sum amount. So when somebody is actually have to maybe forego his job because of the problem, or he has to shift his residence and the normal routine expenses have increased, so the critical illness policy can come into the picture and pay lump sum that amount. Third point which you have mentioned very correctly, that how much is the ideal amount one should buy. So now again, as Mr. Roongta has also mentioned, that in the market today, term plans are very famous because people are taking 1 crore, 2 crores plan to make sure that when they are not there, the family behind can continue to lead the normal life with the same lifestyle. But when somebody is diagnosed and he is still alive, so these policies can come into the picture and help the person to continue to lead the same lifestyle. So I think any sum insured between from 20 lakhs to 50 lakhs would be sufficient enough to take care of out of pocket expenses. Although the term plans should not be, I think, bought less than 1 CR in today's scenario, especially the medical inflation rise, which is rising every year on year, more than 10% on average. So I think that one should keep in mind to ensure that the medical inflation should be kept in mind while opting for the plan.
Okay, all right. Well, on that note, Vikas as well as Harsh, thanks so much for joining us on this edition of The Money Show. We've covered every angle, every corner of how to have enough financial ammunition to battle cancer. And I hope it's helped all the individuals out there watching the show to prep yourselves financially. And I hope that emotionally, physically as well, you're able to battle cancer and come out strong and as a winner. Okay, just before we take that very short break right here on The Money Show, I would just like to address the Q3 numbers of Bharti Airtel. We have the revenue we have the revenue figure which has come in at 21,950 crore rupees. That I suppose is a beat versus the ET Now poll, which pegged the figure at 21,767 crore rupees. However, on the bottom line is where the disappointment has come in. Post all the exceptional items, we expected a loss figure of 638 crore rupees, but that's actually expanded to a little over 1,000 crore rupees. I suppose we'll have to wait for a little while before we sort of, see if there's any bottom line one-offs that are impacting that loss figure, because it's definitely more than what the ET Now poll pegged the figure at. We'll also wait by, of course, for the margin performance and what has been the impact of the tariffs hike. All right, well, on that note, we will take a very short break right here on The Money Show. Do come right back, as I'm going to be catching up with Shubha Modgal of the Cancer Patients Aid Association and all the work that they are doing via their philosophy of total management of cancer.